Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Silver Tempest, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be going over the top 8 decks from the Arlington Regional Championships. This was the largest regional ever. More players attended than the NAIC. So, wow, this game is growing so rapidly and so many people are out there chasing those juicy championship points. And it looked to be a bit of a return of Lugia as we analysed this top 8 with 5 of them once again showing up. I think really from our last set of regionals we saw the counters all come out, and now this week we'll probably see how these Lugias adapted and survived throughout. So I imagine we're going to see some slightly more teched out base builds from ones we've seen previously. Obviously, Tord's Shell is always there with all the 4-ofs, so we're likely to see some cuts in between here. I've not actually looked at all the lists, but I did watch almost all of the regionals, at least from day 2 onwards, so I've got a good grip of an understanding of how the matchups played out and whatnot. And let's have a quick scroll down through these deck lists. It looks like it was a heap of Lugias. A few Reggies getting close, but not quite. Obviously, one was in that top 8. Not many Mews overall, from what I can see here. Mostly Lost Box and Lugias going around. There's this pretty spicy Eterna Wheezing, which actually did well in the previous Champions League. I believe it was in Kyoto. So yeah, pretty good representation. Actually, another Eternatus. So a few of them in there. This was a very large day 2. I'm still scrolling. There's 129 players in day 2. So, yeah, I mean, people have already discussed the tournament structure, and I think it is pretty gross that people can play an additional 5 rounds or 6 rounds, however many it was, in these tournaments and come away with nothing, but that's not my choice. So let's have a look at the top 8, and we'll start with the winner, Connor Finton, very well-established player who hasn't really been in the limelight too much, but has still had some respectable finishes here and there. Has got themselves, I think this is a 2nd regional win. Have to do some Limitless checking, but yeah, it is with a Lugia-based list. It is playing the 3-3 Lugia V-Star line, which is quite an interesting debate. I think a lot of discussion has been around a 4-2 line very often, mostly so you just don't whiff your guy. There's a funny story for Riley Hulbert, unfortunate story, that he was playing a 4-2 line himself, and we'll look at the list later, and actually prized 2 of them in one of his games. I believe it may have even been game 3. So there's an argument to still play 3 copies of the V-Star there. Also just seeing it from Marnies, from judges, even from Mew players these days, is very reasonable. So the 3-3 count versus that 4-2 still would be a debate that rages on. You still have a huge number of outs to get that early Lugia, because we are seeing the respect of 4 captures, the 4 quick, the 4 ultra ball, as well as the 3 Lugia. So it's a small -1 there, but you gain that extra V-Star slot, which is pretty interesting. We have the double Luminion choice here. We've seen how strong it can be in mirror match situations for trying to skew that prize race, dealing with their Yveltals and their Radiant Charizards, even like their Raikus and whatnot to an extent, and throwing another 1-prizer back at them is always a great thing to have. And it's constantly giving you decent access to your stuff. Also, by playing double Luminion, it allows you to have a better time into Mewtwo V Union to an extent. And I actually saw in the win-loss of Connor's post that he was able to beat a Mewtwo V Union, so having fish that you bounce between for at least a while to conserve energy to take prizes on Yveltals and on Snorlax without losing resources is actually very helpful. And also there is the Bird Keeper in here as well. Very soft answer to Paralysis. I think it was so heavily on the radar, and there was talk of Lugia playing Espeon, there was talk of Lugia playing Bird Keeper and Eldegoss. May have put off a number of Paralysis players. A lot of people put off playing Palkia. We didn't see many of them at all in day 2. I don't think I even saw one off the top of my head. So it looks like a lot of people were no longer safe into that Lugia matchup, at least as Palkia players. So that's something to bear in mind, that the softer tech seemed to be enough to have a little bit of respect, but not entirely so. It basically just means when you only play the 1 Bird Keeper, you need to time it so much better if you do face Paralysis nonsense from like Zekrom or Articuno, and you probably need to Bird Keeper into exactly Stoutland and take a 2-prize knockout to really, really heavily punish that Paralysis turn that they go for. Outside of that, the Pokemon line is relatively straightforward. There's no Manaphy in here, which is an interesting take, but it is playing its own Raikou. And of course, it's also not playing Dunsparce. You are much less likely to play Dunsparce when you play your own Raikou, of course, because you can block yourself. But the Raikou coming in obviously has extra benefits into Lost Box matchup, has benefits into the mirror match alongside Choice Belt, certainly. So it's a pretty interesting one. The lack of Manaphy can be punished here and there, but not massively by too many decks, which is surprising actually for how popular it is. I think it just means that this list is quite weak into the likes of Reggie's, for example, where they can make some cute numbers with their 40 damage hits with Regieleki, but this list is at least still playing a Collapse Stadium, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's one of the harder matchups for this Lugia. And the Raikou can come in and do some good work by dealing with Regieleki plus putting damage on other things. I know you're not taking 2 knockouts in one turn, but could be reasonable to set up a double dip Fangs or something like that that's less expensive, I guess you could say. The supporter lineup is pretty much what you've come to expect. The item lineup is exactly what you'd expect. So Connor is still keeping it very simplistic. It is choosing to play a V-Guard energy over... Well, it's not really over anything else. I guess this is kind of the floating space that's sometimes been a gift energy. Still has the 4-ofs of all the most important stuff. Yeah, this could be a gift, this could be a hiding, this could be something like along those lines, but otherwise seems very straightforward. And yeah, solid list. The Raikou seems to have pulled its weight. I actually do like respecting Lost Box this much by having Stoutland and Raikou, because it puts a ton of pressure on them, and this is the way that you really outrace them aggressively. And if I was in the US, I'd be respecting Lost Box massively, because I know that some of the strongest contingent of players have been playing Lost Box since the LAIC, so definitely makes sense to respect it, and it's no surprise that it got a lot of value for Connor. In the finals, Alex had a pretty rough time with this deck, and I think this might put a lot of people off, but this is actually a very similar shell in terms of how it draws cards to the Stuttgart winning regional list that was Vikavolt plus Palkia. The same engine is incorporated here with Mew, with Greninja, with Speed Lightning Energy, with that high Trekking Shoes count. And we've seen that that's a successful option to have here and there. You have the Vikavolt, which is very annoying for Lost Box players, especially with this Zapdos included. You can do that 60, and the Zigzagoon can push you into 70s with scoop-up nets and whatnot. Can really put a ton of pressure on them and shut down a lot of their engines. So really is hellish for Lost Box players to try and deal with. You have Water Energies in here as well to even make Moonlight Shuriken players, albeit slowly, but you can do it against the Lost Box players. And there's also a Raikou in here for trying to give you that type coverage as well. So the Raikou and Vikavolt will be a package that you go for in the Lugia matchup once you've gone second, hoping that a Paralyzing Bolt can stop an opponent from getting Ball Search into their V-Star or into, getting Arceus into the discard pile, that's Archeops into the discard pile, I should say, to actually get rolling in the first place. And Raikou, of course, helping you try and 2-for-2 prize trade at least on the Lugias. Has a Ditto in here as well to sort of give you an extra copy of these sorts of cards here and there. And it's playing the Drapion for the Mew matchup. And of course, the sort of glaring difference between this list and the Palkia one that we saw previously is the 1-1 Aerodactyl V-Star line in the deck, where you're hoping to go first against the Lugia, establish the early Aerodactyl, and turn 2 go for the Ancient Star to deny Summoning Star. And if you are able to pull this combination off, you're in really good shape. But it's still a little bit difficult. I think a lot of the time you're leaning into a deep dig. We saw Alex miss a lot, actually. I do think after game 1 he was probably on tilt and may have been able to make some different decisions, and will probably look back, or probably won't want to look back at that final, because I'm sure there's things he could have done differently. Like in game 2 he easily should have just Paralyzing Bolted a Guru that was trapped active, to give himself the best chance to Ancient Star the following turn. But I digress. I'm sure he won't be happy with his own performance. And I have to stress that this obviously had an extremely strong record into the Lugia matchup. So even though the final didn't go to plan, this deck does have game plans into the popular decks in the room, which are the Lugias and the Lost Boxes, certainly. where the Paralyzing Bolt is just so powerful. So I still really respect this engine. I'm terrified of it being a deck in the game, actually. Both this and the Palkia variants, because I'm someone that likes to play Lost Box, and this punishes that deck quite hard. So yeah, very cool innovation. I'm still not sure if I prefer this Aerodactyl like gimmick compared to just having a Palkia, but I do think it makes your deck like way worse, but exactly when you go first into Lugia, you're making sure you win that game. And just having like guaranteed dubs after an Ancient Star is quite appealing. So I can see why Alex went down this direction. Certainly. So yeah, still a great performance with a twist on a regional winning deck the previous week. And yeah, just seems to keep churning out some great results. Item lock is still very strong in this metagame. Let's have a look at a few other Lugia lists then. This is John Eng's 60. A few different techs coming into this list. Just the 3-2 line, which I myself has actually reduced down to as of late for other tech cards, like myself adding in Birdkeeper Eldegoss and stuff like that. So I kind of understand the 3-2 line. I like it a lot less when there's only 3 captures, obviously. You would want that extra copy. Actually playing a Twin Energy, which we haven't seen in a while, but I guess this is trying to incorporate the Regigigas as an extra attacking threat into the Mew matchup, I guess, for the most part, where you're cashing in on this VMAX. I'm not sure just how valuable Gigas is, but it actually also really helped out against Arcdura as well. This list should be super favoured into Arcdura when it plays double path. Interesting to see that this list plays no bounce to path, only exactly 1 pumpkin, because I think that makes it quite... maybe it's not that weak into Mew because you have the Gigas now, so I guess that's the sort of debate they had around the 60. They're like, without this Gigas, you can have a bit of a tough time like not being able to bounce paths because you shut off your own Luminions, you shut off access to a lot of your plays. But I guess their counter argument would be, okay, we're playing paths now, so we play the Gigas to have that still decent time into Mew, where we have enough one-hit KO capacity from Gigas, from Yveltal, from Lugia as well, at least in the opening stages. So that does make a good amount of sense here. And I also think it makes sense to respect Dura with more than just 1 Lost Vacuum to an extent. Just because of how popular Lugia is, and you don't really have space for many other things. Like, it's hard to find room for Tool Jammers, or the Lost Vacuum can't really be more than a 1-off very often, so that makes a good amount of sense. The energy line, like I said, they finally dropped their gift energy, which they played for a couple of tournaments, and they are valuing the V guard energy, but I still feel like capture has to be the first 4 of on the list. Alongside the Powerfuls and the Auroras. I think it's just so solidly strong, especially with a thinner line of the Lugias. It makes too much sense for me. I do like the double fish, like I said. That seems to be pretty valuable. No respect at all, actually, for these paralysis decks. So it was kind of cool that they teched so heavily the previous week that they were like, I don't need to tech now. I've scared everyone away. I get to play a more streamlined 60, which is a cool thing to note. And yeah, back on the heavy choice belt once again. I'm really surprised by the 3 of choice belt. Their team has gone through this iteration a number of times. It does help you ration powerful colorless to an extent, which is kind of good. But yeah, surprising that this is also a card that they're continuing to play in such high counts. But yeah, an interesting twist with just a couple paths. I don't think we've seen this combination before with just 2 paths in the list. Normally you see like a heavy emphasis on it, or none at all. But in random moments you can find that path in the mirror as well. So that can be another reason to try and go for this. You force it onto your opponent if you've gone second and say, hey, you're not doing anything if you're not summoning. So let's just give it a whirl. Next up we have an Espeon build, actually. So this is the sort of list that has the answers to everything, I guess you could say, because it plays the Espeon, plays the Drapion as well, which is not only for Mew but also for Mewtwo V Union and Control. It plays the Birdkeeper, so it's got all sorts going on, and I think this is what I imagine a number of people actually played in the tournament. It's even playing 1 Vacuum and 1 Path of the Peak, so it is having that little bit of extra respect here and there, which is very nice. The path allows you to have another avenue of knocking out a Mewtwo V Union as well, because you can then Amazing Destruction them. So a lot of good things going on here, and the path being extra help into the Dura matchup as well. So seems like a valuable card. Maybe it's more valuable than just playing a second Vacuum. But again, this list not playing Manaphy or Dunce, so it seems like Manaphy is becoming less and less prevalent, which is, at least for this tournament, which again leans in and really helps out Connor if he was able to establish, if he could punish an opponent using a Guru early or putting down a Yveltal on key turns. These are things that you could really punish by having a Raikou in your 60, which is just something to bear in mind from some other lists that we've seen. That's Jordan's there. Then we have Liam Halliburton with yes, another Lugia. This one is playing Eldegoss Keeper, which is the thing that I probably would have played. It is playing a Raikou and it's playing Snorlax, so pretty one prize heavy, which is really nice. Definitely helpful in like the mirror and against Mew to lead out with a one prize Pokemon if you can. If you've gone second, always just makes them have that much of a better hand, which is cool to see. It's playing that 3-2 line with only 2 captures, so it's very greedy, this 60. It's playing a Capturing Aroma, which I think is pretty sus and is very low on my priority list of cards to play. And it's playing double cancelling Cologne. So Cologne can obviously be a way to shut off Dura. It can be a way to shut off Mewtwo as well, so you can Yveltal through it. And of course, every now and then it gets you through Miltanks and whatnot. So pretty spicy overall. Is that I guess you can even bring up a Manaphy and Amazing Shot stuff as well. So maybe that's the reason why it's played over anything else that we've sseen before. But Cologne's a really interesting one to see overall. It can be a really good way to checkmate some Lost Box players that think they're safe because they have a Manaphy down, because they can re-establish it so easily if you are bossing after them, because they play Rods and they play so much Ball Search and captures at times. So, yeah, Cologne. It looks greedy as hell, but it may not be all that bad. We see the full rainbow of energy with the hiding, the heat, and the speed, and I think that makes sense when you are incorporating that Raikou that little bit more. Because it allows you to use a Yveltal and a Raikou in a game, which sometimes can be relevant, but still not a big fan of the double capture. Like, I've got to be cutting a Capture Aroma here for another Capture Energy, surely. Like, surely, right? And I think you get away with just heat and speed, or just hiding and speed. I don't think you need the full plethora. And Echoing Horn seems really greedy as well. I think I only ever like Echoing Horn if you also play Gift Energy, so you can actually like try and draw the combo to have Horn boss in hand in a single go. I guess to an extent you're doing it with Eldegoss, but it still seems really greedy. There's a lot going on in this list. So I imagine some people will take elements from it, but try and simplify from Liam's list. We have Riley, who's also on a great tear, finally moved away from Mew, but respecting it themselves with the Drapion. Like I said, a lot of people lean towards this Drapion rather than other one-prize Dark stuff because it has the added benefits of helping out against Mewtwo, which won, obviously, the previous regional. This one is kind of more traditional, I guess you could say, where it's got the Dunsparce Manaphy, got the Pump. Pretty much everything is straightforward. It's just choosing to play double Vacuum rather than Vacuum Collapsed, which is exactly a nod to Duraludon, right? So you have extra bounce for an extra access to bouncing Parasols as quickly as possible. And I guess that's the main takeaway here compared to a Collapse Stadium. Energy count, again, pretty self-explanatory. I think you get away with the 3 capture 1 gift when you play the full 4 Lugia and respect that. So seems to be a very well-ironed list, honestly. I think I would like to see space for a second Fish or an Eldegoss, especially when you play only 1 Serena and 2 Boss. I could definitely foresee that being helpful. But overall, very streamlined, very nice-looking list from Riley there. Pretty straightforward. I think a few others in his group played a similar 60 to good success. Did I see that there? I think Mahone also played the same 60. Yeah. So yeah, another great result. And they played against each other, which is a shame. So there could even have been 2 of the exact same 60 in top 8, which would have been insane. We see the standout Reggie amongst the rest. We see a pretty normal energy split. We see a pretty normal Pokemon split, except it's playing the one Reggie Steel. Why do people do this? It stresses me out so much. With 1 Hisuian. 1? Oh my god. Why? And 3 Rod. It's greedy on, like, it's double greed. It's Machine of Greed. My goodness. Like, you've got to drop a shoe, right? Even if you drop a shoe for a Hisuian, Like, come on. Hisuian's so good in the opening stages as well. It's playing full stadium that I like. Like, I like all the counts here. It's just obviously one Registeel is greedy as hell. It's just like, there's no way to say that this isn't super greedy and should punish you in a good amount of games. Like, I don't know how to put it any other way that this is just machine. And I'm not too sure about the mountains versus the Pokestop. To be honest, I guess if you're telling yourself you only play one Pokestop, it means you don't need to play, like, Palpad or anything like that. And just say that you only use it when you're in panic stations. But if you're playing the storm, yeah, it feels weird to play 1-1. Two-Path is kind of fine. It gives you like just enough respect to deal with Dura. Obviously, you can sonar them back as well. But Path is such a strong card into Lugia and to Mew and to Dura. I'd play at least 3 copies of Path as well. I don't know. This is sus. I mean, we've seen so many. How many lists have we seen in top 8s now of Greed Gigas with the one-off of a Reg? Oh, it's so triggering. Let's see the Lost Box then. This is a amazing rare Rayquaza build of Lost Box that made the top 8. Very similar by the looks of things to the list we saw do pretty well online all those weeks ago. Early on in this format has the backup Snorlax. I think it makes a lot less sense to play the Snorlax when you don't play Belt, because it's a way into dealing with Stoutland pretty easily. So that's a little bit interesting, but it's obviously still helpful. The spit into the Thump combo is still like naturally pretty reasonable, and then you can sort of leave excess energies attached, like a Ray on your bench or something like that can be a play. But yeah, it's just an aggressive Mirage Gate based build. I think this is pretty weak in the mirror normally, which is probably the main thing putting people off the 60. Because, you know, you've only got 1 Sable and only 2 rods and only 1 capture, so like recycling that Sableye is so hard, and that's like a huge thing in the mirror, right? Use as many Lost Mines as possible is normally your MO. So a little bit risky of a list there. Sometimes we see the incorporation of Rayquaza and Raikou to give you that 50-50, 2 amazing rares in the list, but then your energy gets so scattered and so difficult to manage that I can see why they haven't gone for that, but I would like to see at least a second Sableye in here to give me some confidence in Mirror. Even without Zigzagoon, I feel less confident, but there you go. That was the only Lost Box in top 8, just because these were on the same records and on the bubble. Let's have a look at some more Lost Box, because it's also my intrigue, because it's some of the more interesting stuff. Because this list from Azul has been essentially adapted from the LAIC week to week, where we've seen mostly Grant doing really, really well with the list. And this time Zeraora is the include of choice with that fighting lightning attack with a belt you can obviously get through Lugia's. The upside of this Zeraora is it's a free retreater and it only requires that 2 energy, so and I guess it reaches KO. I guess it reaches KOs the same and just as easily as the Zekrom that they were playing with Paralysis, but I guess they're saying that Paralysis was a one-time deal. Now that there are Bird Keepers, now that there are Espeons around there, it's far less reasonable to play the Zekrom, which is more work to get going, and damages itself, which also helps a Stoutland. So I guess it makes a little bit of sense here to move on to the Zeraora, and it naturally is a free retreater as well, which has benefits. So it makes sense to have this adaptation. I like having the Snorlax fallback as well, because Snorlax Belt is obviously, again, really important for dealing with Stoutland on the spot. I still see no Raihan, and I still love having Raihan in the list to allow you to guarantee that choice belt into the Lax Thump play. But they've always stuck with more or less a similar support account here. And they still have the Busted Kyogre combo, still really important for some key matchups. This time playing Drapion, I think they had no problem with Mew before, but this would make Mew almost like 100% win rate if you get to play the game. Like, unless you completely brick, you're not losing to Mew with this list. And they also obviously have Mirage Gate Drapion to beat the Mewtwo matchup. So it seems very reasonable there. Just the 1 stadium bounce, though. I guess Yeah, maybe the Drapion's fodder in so many matchups, but there you go. And then we'll have a look at one other Lost Box. I believe this was also on the correct record for cut and just bubbled. But this is the combination of the Raikou Rayquaza that I was mentioning. Like I say, you don't have the luxury of capture, for example. This one is playing 2 Sableye, 1 Zigzagoon. So again, these are the things that I was disliking about the list that we previously saw. But the previous list had like just more aggro Rayquaza, I guess, because it had the Raihan and the Pokegear and that sort of stuff. This one is kind of more down the middle, where it's playing the Sable Zig. So I think you have just way more game into mirror with this list. Again, your energy lineup is pretty disgusting, and you're going to have some very hard flower selects throughout the entire game. So you have to be pretty cautious with that whole gambit. But there's just like a lot of power here, right? The Raikou easily overtakes the power of the Radiant Greninja Snipe because it does so much work into the Lugia matchup, even if you're not able to, this plays no belt, right? So you have no way of dealing with the Lugia in one hit, but 240 is such a substantial amount of damage that you can Lost Mine, mop up later. So I really like this combination. I think this will be something that I explore for myself if I consider Lost Box going ahead. I think, again, with a Vikavolt getting a first in Stuttgart and then a second the following week just tells me that Vikavolt is so good into Lost Box, and it's like one of the biggest worries for me as someone who wants to play it myself. But yeah, really interesting stuff. Lots more Lugias, lots more Reggies, and other Lost Boxes doing pretty well in that top 32. One Mew Genesect made it all the way to 24th place. Let's just see where it ended up. This is a path judge-based build of Mew. No surprise there, really. He's playing the Parasol as well, so a few techs involved. One Rogue, Arcdura as well in the mix. Actually playing the Eldegoss, which we saw previously in one of the... was it the regional winning Arcdura played in Eldegoss? I think it did, right? So a few things here. Even one Palkia did make top 32. And it was playing Empoleon. Time to bring Empoleons back. None of these Lost Boxes play paths, you know that for sure. So everyone's disrespected Empoleon to the point where maybe it's time again. Maybe. I don't know. Kind of sus. But yeah, let me know your thoughts of Arlington. How did you perform if you were at the tournament? How did your day go? And where do we go from here? Lugia back on top. Lost Box way too good to consider a number of things like Zorobox as a counter-style archetype. What do you think about the Vikavolt? Was it copium? Do you think it's just terrible? Or did Alex just have A, really bad luck in game one, and then B, I think fell a little bit to tilt? I think when you go in with that mindset of thinking, I'm very favourable in this matchup, I've beaten X amount of Lugias to get here in the first place, how could things go wrong? And then things just don't fall into place. That frustration, I think, just overtook him a little bit. And it was a shame to see, because he was sort of overcome with emotion in that final. But again, great accomplishment for Connor. Still played his outs really nicely in the final, actually, and I think his list may have even helped him out a little bit here and there. So let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.